And you were, in this case, detached from the outcome, but you applied all those principles.
That's right. That's right. What my spiritual director said was, don't focus on the outcome. Trust the process. If you're in alignment and you're working after praying, you can trust that the outcome is correct. And I felt that this project was almost an opportunity for me to demonstrate spiritual principles. It felt that way, but I had to be so practical. It wasn't that I could be holy about this. I had to be really engaged and really active. But in my own internal self, I was trying to be just as spiritually sound as I possibly could. And that combination was a winning combination. And I think that part of this can be a small template as to how changes can happen in the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Planetary Makeover. My guest today is Ellen Turgasen. She hails from Madison, Wisconsin. She's a nurse, a massage therapist, and a social as well as spiritual activist. But I'll let her explain that to you in detail in her own words. Hello, Ellen. Great to have you here.
Thank you, David. It's nice to be here, and I appreciate being invited to speak at the Planetary Makeover show. The reason I thought it would be appropriate for me to talk with you tonight is that when you said I was a social activist, that hasn't been for very long. In May of this year, I work as a massage therapist in an old solid brick building. And there's two buildings side by side. One of them was built in 1914. One of them was built in 1918. And I work in the 1918 building called Bedford Square. The building right next to us was foreclosed on by the city of Madison, and they bought it, and their plan was to demolish it and take away the building and the parking lots on the side of the building to incorporate them into adjacent park land. And that would have meant for the building that I work in that it would be left standing all alone on a corner with no parking access, and probably would be next in the vision to demolish it as well. There are 29 tenants in our building, 37 service providers, and we do things like massage therapy, art therapy, psychotherapy. There's a church in the building, and most of the people are doing healing work. Some of the people in the building have been there for 35 years. I've been there for 27 years. So in May, my landlord called me and told me that the city had proposed the demolition of that building next door to ours, absolutely adjacent to ours. And it had already been passed by the city council to do this. And he had tried to get a couple of his lawyers to take on the case to see if he could get that reversed. And neither one of his lawyers wanted to, quote unquote, fight City Hall. So they declined the case. And he called me to tell me about it. And he didn't call necessarily to ask me to do anything, but he just called because we're friends, and he had to tell somebody that our building was in jeopardy. It was going to be in jeopardy. And I didn't know what to do or what it had to do with me, but I knew that really somebody had to start to defend this building and try to get the city council to change their mind on this.
So, Ellen, what did you end up doing, if I may interrupt just briefly, and how do you tie that in? You can let us know a little further into the story, into your broader spiritual work. What did you do in response to all this?
Well, the first thing I did, I knew that this would be a combination of my spiritual life and my secular life, because I couldn't take on a project like this without being aligned spiritually. My personality couldn't take this on. I didn't have the skills and I didn't have the composure, and I didn't know what to do. So I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what to do, but I knew how to do it. I knew that if I was going to take something on like this, I had to be spiritually aligned and do it based on the ageless wisdom teachings that I've been studying for many years. The ageless wisdom teachings are just a group of teachings that study how human beings are related to the greater universe. They have spiritual principles, but they aren't connected to any particular religion. A couple of teachers that I've been reading through the years is Alice Bailey and Benjamin Creme, who are both authors about the ageless wisdom teachings. And so I wanted, if I took this endeavor, I wanted to make sure that I was following spiritual principles that included the truth, service, goodwill, harmlessness, unity, discipline, and I wanted it to be done correctly.
This reminds me of the interview you did back in 2016, where you talked about how the people you knew who were spiritual weren't interested in politics, and the people you hung with that were interested in politics weren't interested in spirituality. And so you were caught between two worlds. And it sounds like back then, and as a continuing theme in your life, now you have successfully combined the both of them and made it an effective tool for change.
Yes, and I call it practical mysticism, being a practical mystic. Like I said, I didn't know quite what to do, but I knew how I wanted it done, and I also knew why I was doing it and why I was taking this on, something this kind of challenging, was because I love all the people in my building that work there. I love them. I've been there for 27 years, and I thought I would like for them all to be able to stay and keep doing their work. So I'm going to fight for this building. And that was my love and the belief that if we followed the spiritual principles, that there would be spiritual help, that God would help us. So every morning I would get up and do a meditation for the building. And there came I had prayers that I did. I had a little altar with a picture of the building. And so I felt connected spiritually as I was doing this. But then I had to get in the practical side of the mysticism. And I called a friend who works for the State Historical Society, and he got me on the concrete path. He told me that I would need to be, he said, first of all, he said, the reason that the landlords or the lawyers of your landlord didn't take on this case, he said, lawyers don't save buildings, people do. He said, it's people power that save buildings. And he said, you're at the 11th hour if they have passed this resolution to demolish the building. But buildings have been saved in the 11th hour. He gave me some names of people that I could talk to. He also told me that I would need to have a written statement saying everything that we needed. I needed to work in group formation, which also reminded me of the fact that we're in the Aquarian time now, and the energies in the Aquarian time favor group work.
Yes, Ellen. You sensed a question that I was chomping at the bit to ask you, and that would be how this work you're doing now is intersecting with the ageless wisdom teaching. And one of the things you brought up that hadn't occurred to me before, when you talked about the 11th hour, I know that the world teacher Maitreya had spoken in one of Benjamin Creme's books. I believe it was The Laws of Life. He talked about being there with people in their 11th hour. In that case, he was talking about as a person was dying, because 11 is 1 and 1, 1 plus 1. And in the 11th hour, he said, it is you and I. And in this case, the 11th hour was you and the building that needed to be saved.
That's so cool, David, that you bring that up, because really the building was on life support when we started this project. And so I started gathering the people in the building to work with me on this, just as my friend had advised. And we wrote up, the first thing to do was to write a letter to City Hall. And that took a long time to write that. And what I did was I tried to use I was committed to using truth in the fullest sense of the word, that everything that I said and everything that was communicated to the public and also to City Hall was precisely the truth. And I found the use of right speech to be very important in this project. I recognize in politics these days, there are a lot of half-truths or manipulations of the truth. And I wanted everything that happened in this project to be the absolute pristine truth. And it turned out that letter was well received in City Hall. And we were able to speak then with the park superintendent, who opened up a conversation with him. But that was the practical side of things. I also consulted with a newspaper editor from our local newspaper, and she said that I should do a petition and also do a roster of our building to introduce the names of everyone who works there to City Hall, which we did. She said something that this might help some people in the audience. She said a petition, if there are 100 names on a petition, that's an event for the newspaper. 100 names on a petition in a city is an event. I liked knowing that. And also the man that I talked to from the Historical Society said, don't negate the power of letters to your city officials and your government officials. He said he remembered a representative from the United States Congress telling him, if we get 10 letters on any subject, 10 personal letters from our constituents on any subject, we consider that noteworthy and that we have to pay attention. So that's just something for people to know.
And that's very interesting, Ellen, too, because there was a bunch of words that you give me that you associated with this whole effort. And among them were, and let me look at that list you gave me: truth, service, goodwill, right relationship, harmlessness, unity, discipline, and sacrifice. And two of these you've already mentioned. Under truth, number 1, right speech. And under service, number 2, you talked about petition, the building roster, and the power of the word. So we've still got goodwill, right relationship, harmlessness, unity, discipline, and sacrifice to go. So go for it.
I knew that everyone in our building had to be had to be in unity in order to present ourselves to city government, to show that they were working with a group and not just with an individual. And so we practiced everything that was written or communicated to City Hall was signed and co-signed by everybody in our building. And I wrote an update to everyone in the building on a regular basis. But I knew that what we were trying to do was get the city officials to change their mind, but without losing face. I wanted this to be a harmless. I didn't want to bring shame to anyone. I didn't want to accuse anyone. I didn't want anyone to feel like they've been embarrassed publicly. So we were very careful to be harmless in our efforts and also stay in right relationship with everyone as best we could. We focused goodwill in the project by talking about what positive effect this building could still have on that area for the Parks Commission. We put out a proposal for what it could possibly be used for, and we came up with plans of using it for a public space, like a coffee shop, and then do an event, have an event space, or have it be the bicycle central for the bike paths of Madison with a mural on the side. And so we all cooperated in coming up with ideas so that the city officials could have their ideas and think, oh, we could do that, and move away from wanting to simply demolish the building. But one thing also on the spiritual side, in the middle of all this, as I said, I was praying every morning. And in the middle of all of this, about a couple of months in, 6 weeks into the process, I was feeling like maybe I was praying too much. I started to have doubts of my spiritual activities. And so I called, because every morning I'd pray for the building. I thought, am I badgering God? I would imagine, like, if we would ask anybody for something every day, that other person might say, I hear you, I know you would like that. And so I called a spiritual director that I know and said, could I consult with you? So I got a spiritual consultation about this. And she had some interesting things to say. One thing she said, when you are praying, you're not praying to ask God for something. You might use those words, but really what your prayer is doing is aligning you with your soul before you start your work. If you're aligned with your soul through your meditations, then it is your soul who is informing your work. And if your work is soul informed, it can bring in the higher energies of God, of Christ, and help with this, help bring synchronicities, help bring people your way to facilitate this process. So she said, keep doing your prayers, because you're not bothering God. Your prayers aren't for God, they're for you. They're to enable you to do God's work, but you are the instrument. And we were talking about, I do know about the world teacher who is here, the name Maitreya, who is here ushering in the new age of Aquarius that we're entering into. At the beginning of every new age, there is a teacher. And there's a teacher who is here to help humanity to find our way into the new age using the principles that are necessary to bring humanity forward. And
these are the principles you applied to your fight, correct?
These are the principles that applied to the fight. And the name of the world teacher who's here helping humanity at this time is Maitreya. People who are listening to this program may have heard of Maitreya on previous programs. But what he has said is, I'm here to teach you. I'm here, but every brick of the new civilization needs to be placed by human hands. Maitreya is here not just by himself, but with a group of masters who are human beings who have lived on Earth before for many, many incarnations, and they've achieved mastery and perfection. So now they can come and be our elder brothers and sisters to help humanity. They work with Maitreya to help humanity.
And Ellen, that brings to mind something mentioned in the last Ellen Turgasen show as well. And that is that famous quote that you just alluded to when Maitreya says, I am the architect only of the shining temple of truth. You, my friends, are the willing builders. And the shining temple of truth being the new civilization. And your story is a microcosm of the macrocosm, because you're saving this building and, in a sense, rebuilding it, because you're repurposing it and making sure that it has a new lease on life, not to be punny.
That's exactly true. The corner that we're on is called Bedford Street, and I feel like we aren't doing a planetary makeover. We're doing a Bedford Street makeover, and I knew that I've been spiritually blessed by having experiences with meditation, by being helped all along spiritually in my life. And I felt like this was an opportunity to give back, to put the principles that I've been studying and meditating about and talking about into practice. And that is what I did. As it turned out, through the meditations, and as my spiritual director had said, facilitating the actions through alignment with my soul, with the soul, synchronicities did happen. A great one was in late August. I was invited to a meet and greet downtown in Madison, where all of the downtown aldermen were present. And I was talking to one of the aldermen and telling him our story. And he said, I think you should talk to the alderman of that building. And I hadn't yet, because I was a bit intimidated by him, actually, and hadn't had a chance to talk to him in person. And he said, I will introduce you. So all of a sudden, I found myself sitting at a table with the alderman who had made this proposal in the first place back in April. And I had my 3-ring binder. I had been very disciplined through all of this to keep meticulous notes, keep everything in a binder. And so I had everything to show him of what we wanted and what we were asking for. And he looked at the binder and he looked at me and he said, are you the one who wrote the petition? And I said, yes. He said, well, I've seen the petition. I've seen your petition. And I almost said, have you signed it? And he said, are you guys by any chance going to have a meeting soon? And I said, we are. We're planning a meeting for September 7th. He said, I would like to be at your meeting.
Wonderful. Here, the person that you were intimidated by wants to come to your meeting. Maybe when he saw the work you did, he was a little intimidated by you.
To me, I had to pinch myself. And I had wanted him to be at a meeting with us, but most people said, he won't come. He's too busy. He doesn't do things like that. He's been in politics for 25 years. He keeps himself pretty insulated. So he said, could I come to your meeting? And I said, yes, would you like to? He said, yes, I would. So a week later, we found ourselves as a tenant association in our building with the alderman and with the superintendent of parks and with the tenants and with our landlord and a few people from the community in a meeting together. And it was remarkable that the superintendent of parks and the alderman both said, we've changed our minds.
Wow. Look what you did. You went from people being afraid to take on City Hall to changing City Hall.
It was quite something. And they said, we're not going to commit to not tearing down the building because we want to do a structural analysis, structural integrity testing. So we're going to protect the building for the winter from the elements. And then in the spring, we'll do structural integrity testing. If the building is structurally sound enough, and he said, we think it is, we will repurpose it for the Parks Department. And regarding your parking, we now have seen the roster of who you all are. We respect what you do. We need you downtown doing what you do. We're going to maintain your parking easement for at least the next 5 years, because the whole parks are going to be revamped in 5 years. And as long as it's under the current ownership, and the landlord was there.
Well, how good you must have felt at that moment.
I felt good. I felt very good, although I wasn't giddy. I was because I was in charge of this meeting. So it was still I was feeling quite serious about everything, making sure that we had everything written down and documented. But when the meeting ended, it lasted an hour, and everybody left, chatter in the room and the looks on people's faces. And the alderman was chatting it up with my landlord and the park superintendent. He had to go to pick up his kids from school. And it was just like almost not a party, but good spirits, high spirits. And the meeting itself was earnest. When, like I said, I was the MC of the meeting, but I would look out at the audience and everybody was just looking and listening, and the park superintendent was really, really earnest. He spoke, he was very transparent.
So, Ellen, I was just going to say, as an observation, you transmuted all that negative energy, you can't fight City Hall, we haven't got the strength or the organization or the money to do this, into a win, as you said, for everyone. But what I want to emphasize is how you transform negative energy into positive energy. It's all the same energy, but you rechanneled, repurposed it, and brought about a renewal of the building.
Thank you. I feel good about it. What I really appreciated when everybody was leaving that night after the meeting was everyone in the room was in right relationship. That I was the most proud of that. I was as proud of that everyone was in right relationship as I was that the building was going to be saved and we could keep our parking. I was so pleased that everyone in the room felt they had a part in it. They had a stake in it. The alderperson, they changed their mind without losing face. That was exactly what I had in mind. And I also remember asking Benjamin Krem, the author that we mentioned of many of the books about the ageless wisdom teaching. I remember asking him once at a conference I was at that he was speaking. I said, how do you know that you're living a soul-directed life? And he said, are you doing your best? And I feel like in this endeavor, I did my best. And also I trusted the process. And my spiritual director had said, don't cling to the outcome, because the outcome can be different than anything you can imagine. The outcome is in potential only. So don't pray for a specific outcome. Don't pray that it turns out one way or another.
You were detached, Ellen.
She recommended detachment.
Which brings to mind those 3 principles that the world teacher Maitreya, who we both mentioned, is imparting to the world to help save humanity. And those are honesty of mind. Most of us do one thing, say another, and are thinking yet a third. Sincerity of spirit. Many people aren't themselves. We kowtow, we imitate, we do what we think pleases people, rather than being our true selves. And the third, and the most difficult, and perhaps the most important, detachment. And you were, in this case, detached from the outcome, but you applied all those principles.
That's right. That's right. What my spiritual director said was, don't focus on the outcome. Trust the process. If you're in alignment and you're working after praying, you can trust that the outcome is correct. And I felt that this project was almost an opportunity for me to demonstrate spiritual principles. It felt that way, but I had to be so practical. It wasn't that I could be holy about this. I had to be really engaged and really active. But in my own internal self, I was trying to be just as spiritually sound as I possibly could. And that combination was a winning combination. And I think that part of this can be a small template as to how changes can happen in the world. Rather than fighting City Hall or fighting for change, to find a way to seek change in right relationship with everyone and with cooperation versus competition, and with earnestness and not antagonism. At the meeting, it was interesting. The alderman said to the group, "I just want you all to know you've got a great representative here in Ellen. She knows of what she speaks." So that was a testimony to me that the truth prevailed here. There was no wiggle room into anything that I had said or written, and that was the commitment to having every word be the complete truth. I find it quite irritating and disconcerting how the truth is manipulated these days in politics and on social media. And I just wanted this all to be clean. I wanted it to be complete, whatever the outcome.
And you bring up an important point, Ellen, because in today's politics, where the spiritual crises are for mankind today, spiritual crises today aren't in philosophy or religion. They're in politics and economics. That's where the true injustice and the problems lie. We know there are cases where it's a little messier than things turned out for you. And it's great that you follow the principles and they work. We know in some cases we do end up fighting and even dying. And across the world, people are applying the principles that you've outlined. Some are succeeding. Some are laying down their lives. And in a way, they are succeeding as well because they're willing to give the full measure of their lives to make those changes. And they are helping bring about those changes, even with their loss of life. This is much less dramatic, not to mention less violent, and you made it work. So you're setting an example for your town, your city, your state, the country, and the world.
It's kind of like a microcosm within the macrocosm.
Indeed it is. And so how do you once again tie this in to the work you've done to make the emergence of the world teacher Maitreya and his group, the Masters of Wisdom, humanity's elder brothers, reemergence back into the world? How do you tie in your work in that regard with your work in saving this town, or saving this building for the town?
I would say that Maitreya and the Masters are looking to humanity to see how far we've come, to see if the teachings, if their energies are being responded to. And I think that when they see human beings earnestly trying to incorporate the teachings, the principles of truth and service and goodwill and relationship, right relationship, that empowers the Masters as well to give us more teachings and more of their energies. Yeah, that's how I would see it.
And in so doing, you demonstrated, once again, as we've already said, applying the principles that mankind's elder brothers are teaching us and making them work. You stood firmly, in the stream, despite the water going the other way or the wrong way. And you made certain that you stuck to your principles. And people saw that. They witnessed that. They probably expected the same reactions they get from others, whether it be having a meltdown in the meeting or not getting enough signatures and giving up, or, as I said, making a scene either in a meeting or in writing or in a demonstration. But you found a way to stand firm in your principles and not be bent or broken. And people notice that, because it doesn't happen even in this age as mankind is beginning to wake up. It doesn't happen often enough. And perhaps it doesn't happen that often here in Boston or in Madison, Wisconsin. And so you certainly made an impression. But the story's not over yet, is it? You've got more to tell us.
Yes, well, as it turned out, there was another chapter after this. And the aldermen and the city parks, they had to write a new resolution for City Hall just last week to get passed because they were going to buy the property now at a higher price. It turned out that they were buying the property at a low price, and the woman who had it previously wasn't getting enough for it and was actually homeless as a result of that. She hadn't paid her taxes was the reason for the eviction.
And so she lost the building to the city.
She lost the building to the city, and the city was taking the building at just the cost of the taxes and not paying the market value. And it turned out that the Supreme Court of the United States stepped in and did a ruling in the summer saying that that's illegal and you have to buy it at the market value.
And this ruling, Ellen, this was was the Supreme Court ruling on your case or another case?
The Supreme Court ruling, it was for another case, but it counts for all of the U.S.
It applied.
It applies, yeah. Tyler versus Hennepin County, a woman was evicted and she didn't get her fair share of her building, and the family sued and they were told you can't do that. So that was happening, and they put a new proposal in last week to the City Hall to reflect the higher purchase price, which is great. Now the woman will get enough that she can find a different housing. But in the small print, they didn't include the building was going to be rehabilitated, and they didn't include that our parking easement was going to be kept. So we were told this, but it wasn't written in the new proposal. And I saw the proposal. Someone told me that it was going to be presented in City Hall. It was a week ago Tuesday. And I looked at it and I thought, oh no, they didn't put it in writing what they told us. So once again, I had to write a letter and ask for amendments, which I did. And that it took about a week, and I got some consultations, and I wrote a letter, and I finished it last Monday asking for 2 amendments, one mentioning the building and that they were going to analyze the building for safety and then repurpose it. And then the other, they were going to save our parking easement. And it wasn't in the resolution. And for one thing, I couldn't believe it, but I thought, well, and it was hard to get back. It's like running a marathon. You think you're done, and then somebody says you have to run another 5 miles. And I think that's life too. So I wrote a letter using the same principles of just the facts, and everything was completely the truth. And I submitted it last Monday. And then I got a call saying that the finance committee of the city of Madison was meeting last Monday. And would I speak? So I finished the letter in the morning, and at 4:30 in the afternoon, I was speaking in front of the finance committee, and this alderman was on the finance committee. So he was there, and that was almost as hard as any of this was, to have to reopen this and, speak about this again.
The suspense is killing me, Ellen. Did you get those amendments?
Yes. He had gotten my email. he had gotten the email. The superintendent had gotten the email. He had the superintendent patch in on Zoom from his car and say, we will amend the resolution. The building will be evaluated. And I don't know, and the easement will be respected. Everything we said at the meeting, because I was able to say they've already tidied up the building, and we were told this at the meeting, and so we would like the resolution to reflect what we were told. And I sort of did put them on the spot, but I spoke the truth and with care. And it is being revised before the final vote, which will be this coming Tuesday.
Excellent. So yet another victory by sticking to your guns, as it were, in this case, sticking to your principles and getting everybody involved. And you also, wasn't there something about how you got the newspapers involved in the story too? Could you talk a little more about that?
Actually, I spoke to the newspaper editor, but I didn't ever go to the reporters because I hadn't spoken to the alderman. And I knew that if I speak to a reporter, they would say, well, what does the alderman say? And I would have had to say, I haven't talked to him yet. So I hadn't gone to the newspapers yet. I had talked to the editor and she told me what I would need to say and what the timing should be. And so I was just kind of waiting for that to happen, but it didn't ever happen because it turned out I found out about this meeting with the alders, with the meet and greet, and then they invited themselves to our meeting, and that's what happened. So the newspapers weren't ever involved with this, even though I was prepared. I was prepared to do it. Something that I was struck by, though, with all of this, and it's back to the spiritual alignment. So many things fell into place that I couldn't believe the synchronicities. And I committed myself to doing what I could. And if there was something that I couldn't do, I didn't do it. I asked somebody else to do it. And that was part of the truth and the discipline of it too. I would do what I could, but I didn't do what I couldn't or what I didn't completely believe in. And going to the newspapers, it was premature. We didn't have enough. We didn't have everything in place to go to the newspapers yet.
So you made this a true group effort in the spirit of the age of Aquarius.
Yes, we tried. Yes, that's what we tried to do. That's what we tried to do. After the whole meeting and everything was finished, I got quite a few thank you notes from people. And I felt with the thank you notes that they were thanking me for my efforts, but I really felt like they were recognizing that this effort was a profound one on all of our behalf. And people were pleased with the results. And again, not just the results of we got what we wanted, but that everybody left with a good feeling about it. That to me was the most positive.
Because everyone saw that the group effort and the process worked.
And nobody was left out. Nobody was left out.
So in addition to this type of social activism victory, and the Ageless Wisdom teaching, can you tell us a little bit more about how your spirituality guides you in reference to Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom, mankind's elder brothers?
Well, one of the practices that I do regularly is transmission meditation. And transmission meditation is a meditation of service where it's a group of 3 people or more. And I have a group that meets in my office on Friday mornings. And also I participate online with a variety of transmission meditations. We say a prayer called the Great Invocation, which invokes the energies of light and love and the will of God. And then we sit and focus on the Ajna center between our eyebrows and allow the masters focus the energy out into the world. The people doing the meditation are transmitters. That's why they call it transmission meditation. It was started by Benjamin Krem in the 1970s. And when COVID happened, I was a nurse, but I also I was healing from a hip injury, and so they were asking for help. They were asking for nurses. They were asking for help, but I couldn't go out and be active. I couldn't be as active as I would have been 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So I remember just pray, just what I could do was pray. And so I participated in every transmission meditation group. It was actually online at the time. Now groups are meeting in person again, and many are meeting online as well. And I decided I would do as much as much meditation as I possibly could, and have that be my service. And I think that the connection that I have made in being in meditation so much has enabled me to be sensitive to the energies that came through and respond to them when this endeavor with the building came along. I feel like I was spiritually stronger because of my meditations.
So, Ellen, in effect, do you find that transmission meditation actually helped you achieve this victory along with your cohorts in Madison, Wisconsin?
I feel definitely that transmission meditation helped me achieve this victory, because I feel like I know what it means to be aligned. I know what it means to be centered spiritually. And anytime you do something for service, and this meditation is for service, it takes oneself out of the center of the stage, and it's done for others. And so when this building situation came up, yes, I'm a tenant in the building and I'm benefiting from not having to move or get a new office, but I immediately wanted to do it for others. And that was, and I was, even though I was at the center of it, it didn't feel like I was at the center. It was like the we was at the center. So doing transmission meditation and doing service has allowed me to get out of my own way and be one helping many. And that's a reflection of spiritual truth.
So, Ellen, the meditation actually helps put you more in touch with the soul, and our understanding is that the soul knows nothing but service. And so doing the transmission meditation made you more service oriented. And this was a service, certainly, that you provided to your community. Very concrete, down to earth, not abstract or esoteric, but very much in tune with the community and the everyday life of your fellow workers and the city itself.
Exactly. And also in terms of the Maitreya being on earth, we're told that there will be a time when he will present him. He's working behind the scenes now with the masters, influencing people and decisions. But there will come a time where he will come forward and speak to us openly. And the world will be different. But how will the different world look? How those of us who understand the spiritual principles and want the changes that are ahead for people to have enough food, housing, shelter, and health care to live a life of dignity, those are the priorities of Maitreya. How can we live now as if it already is the case?
Well, I think you're saving the building is a good example, Ellen. That's the answer. Apply these principles to your everyday life, and that will help prepare the way, not only for ourselves to live a better life, but the way for the world teacher Maitreya to enter the world without interfering with our free will.
Exactly, because we're doing the work, he will be supporting us.
And what would you recommend for other groups who are having the same struggle? And what have you learned from this episode in your life?
I've learned that it is as in terms of a project like this, it requires a tremendous amount of time. The time it takes to write a letter, the time it takes to organize meetings. One has to have a time commitment. That's one thing, to be straight up. This doesn't come, the letter that I wrote to City Hall, the first letter, took 2 weeks, 2 weeks to write it and to reread it and to rework it and to get people's opinions and then rework it. So things just took more time. But to spend as much time on one's inner life as you spend on your outer life, so that the outer life can reflect the inner life. The other thing is the reading of spiritual teachers, the Ageless wisdom teachings, the books of Benjamin Creme, and Alice Bailey. There are two women before Alice Bailey who also wrote about the Ageless wisdom teachings, Helena Blavatsky and Helena Rorich, are examples. But there are others. So I think having a spiritual connection, whatever that is, whatever one's religion is.
And perhaps, Ellen, too, that it would benefit us to expand our definition of spiritual, to recognize that it is not the sole purview of religion, that you could have spiritual activism, as you demonstrated, spiritual lawyering, spiritual accounting,
Exactly.
spiritual janitorial work, anything that benefits and drives forward the evolution of the race, the human race, is in fact spiritual.
And these principles that we've been talking about, spiritual laws or guidance of truth, service, goodwill, right relationship, harmlessness, unity in diversity, discipline, and sacrifice, can be used across all professions and are included in all religions. Maitreya, in terms of religion, Maitreya has not come, he's awaited by all the religions, await a coming one. But he is not coming as a religious teacher. There are enough religions, and each religion, if followed wholeheartedly and correctly, can take one along the path.
And my understanding is, too, that Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom don't want us to believe in them,
yes,
in the traditional sense, whatever that may mean,
yes,
because belief is in many ways of the mind. The mind can choose to believe anything it wishes, true or false. And what Maitreya had said, I'm alluding back to Benjamin Creme's book, specifically The Laws of Life. He said that it's when you experience me in your heart that it matters. Then you know that you and I are one. No one had to tell you. No one preached to you. It didn't come from the outside. It wasn't imposed. It came from the inside out.
It's a resonance.
Exactly.
It's a resonance.
And your work and your coworkers and partners' work in saving your building, I think, is going to resonate across Madison and Wisconsin as well, and probably even further. Who knows? People may be studying this case years from now, even though it didn't have to go to the courts, which is a good thing. And now that we know that through this type of work, a better world is possible, how do you see yourself improving the world in other ways, particularly through your spiritual life, going forward?
Well, one thing, I'm ready to kind of go back to my massage therapy and focus on that wholeheartedly again. Because I feel like I'm a different person now. I feel like I'm a different person, and I've got kind of more to offer my own clients. But I also think that I'm open to what comes my way in terms of ways to serve, and perhaps ways to influence other people's outreach or activism endeavors. So if that opportunity comes, I'm open to helping just as other people helped me in my endeavor.
Which brings us back to the resonance that you mentioned. You'll be able to help people that you probably in this lifetime won't even meet. People will hear about your story. Perhaps it will be mentioned at some point in the newspapers, on radio, television, the internet, and they'll say, wow, we need to do the same thing. I got to get my cohorts together, my coworkers, and we got to save this building or this stream or this set of woods or the river or any host of things that need doing. And through your work, you can inspire others. And that will bring about another thing that Benjamin Creme, whose books we've talked about, mentioned. He talked about in the future there being the good news show, as opposed to,
oh, exactly.
Remember that? As opposed to news as we see it today, as I think he called it, quote, the hysterical news media that loves only a crisis. And he presented in the future the broadcaster saying, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Good News Show. I have good news for you today. And then they'll talk about how in such and such state or city, they eliminated poverty or homelessness or hunger or pollution. And he said, up the scorecards will go. People will be watching and say, wait a minute, we need to do that in our city. And that'll be the competition of the future, a healthy competition, much like sports, to improve the world rather than just accumulate goods and make money. And I think you've set that kind of example for medicine.
That is what we did. That is what we did. I'm grateful to have been part of this process. And as my spiritual guide said, let the outcome be with God. Trust the process. And what were the instrumental aspects of the process that helped, I think, is what can be studied and repeated in other situations.
That's right. And you remind me of something else Benjamin Creme had said in one of his books that, and I paraphrase, we live in an age of ever increasing miracles. And some people would view what you and your group did as a miracle. But it had sound, grounded principles behind it. It wasn't some airy-fairy, new agey, flaky type of procedure. It was very grounded in practical application of the law and of the principles that you mentioned and applied.
That's right. This miracle happened because it was what we did, invoked it. It didn't come from an angel from the sky. Well, I'm sure there may be angels from the sky who were helping us, and I did pray with Saint Archangel Michael for that building. I would hold his Archangel Michael, and say, save that, stay standing, stay strong. I used to say that to the building. But the way we did it was invocative. And that's something Benjamin Creme talks about too, that prayer in the Aquarian age, in the New Age, will be less petition, less asking, and more living in a way that allows things to manifest.
You're right. Instead of sort of a supplication where we're down here, asking and almost begging for something, we're using principles that actually invoke the energy and pull it in. So we're taking a more active and responsible role in creating the new civilization.
Exactly. And that is our role as disciples and as human beings. That is what we'll be called to do now.
And I think that with that, we'll have to close up shop for now because we're out of time.
I enjoyed talking with you, David. Thank you so much. You understand this so completely. It's good to be understood by you, as well as being interviewed by you.
And you helped me understand this whole process of saving buildings and institutions that are near and dear to us in each of our own cities and homes. And that's something that I'll take home with me. And I hope much of our audience will as well, and be just as inspired and as effective as you were. Thank you, Ellen. And thank you, everyone, for sharing in the telling of this story. And we look forward to seeing you here again, and hopefully Ellen as well, on Planetary Makeover. And Ellen has put together a number of quotes, both from author, artist, and esotericist Benjamin Creme and the world teacher Maitreya, and those will be available on our Facebook page as well as our website. And we hope that folks will take the time to read and be inspired by them and to look into this information further. Thank you. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with your friends. We appreciate your comments and we respond to them.